As governor, how would you balance the need for a first-rate educational system with the current fiscal realities, and what specifically would you do? And Mr. Neumann, you might want to go into more detail on that when you return to the podium.
Well, like I said, there are many reasons to be concerned about education, and I have my two sons, a freshman and a sophomore in high school. But for me, as I also mentioned, it's an economic imperative. And I think there are a number of things. For starters, for school districts here and all across the state, it is amazing to me that Jim Doyle called himself the pro-education governor, because he's been anything but pro-education, not only cutting more than $100 million out of the public aid system for schools, but more importantly, repealing the QEL, the Qualified Economic Offer, which at minimum at least gave local school districts the ability to control and not see the money that they did get from the state and that they do get from the local property taxes be blown away entirely into wages and benefits, and instead make sure that more of that money is funneled directly into the classroom. As governor, I'd restore either the QEO or something parallel to that, because I think that has been a good tool for local administrators and local school districts to be able to control their own destiny. On top of that, we've got to pull back on mandates. There are too many mandates when it comes, and certainly whether it's special education being underfunded by both the state and the federal level, but also in terms of individual mandates that impede upon local school districts. Different parts of the state have different priorities in terms of specialized skills and needs that they need for the workforce in that given community. We've got to give those school districts the ability and power to act on that. We would do all those things, as well as in addition to just restoring the QEL, I'd like to open up the door and say that for every school district, you have an option to buy into the state healthcare plan, which is cheaper than most school districts out there. If you would come to us and show us that you've got a plan that's cheaper than what the state has, we'd like to know about it, because we'd like to get the state to do that. But at a minimum, you could do that on your own. But right now, most school districts buy into plans that are run by the WA Trust, which is by the Teachers Union Trust, which is much more cost ineffective than what they would get from the private sector, and definitely from the state government pool. We should say, if you're going to get state aid from us, you should have to buy into that plan and try and lower those costs as well. And in long term, beyond that, we've got to give local school districts even greater control over wage and benefit reforms. Again, it's something that we did in the county years ago, long before Governor Christie did in New Jersey. I went out on a reality tour and made the case that you could not sustain government on the path that it was faced with wages and benefits. We know it all too well here in Kenosha County or in Rock County when it comes to Chrysler or GM. That's exactly the path they took to failure in the past. We got to make sure we don't have our governments going down that same path. And we got to give our local governments the ability to negotiate better plans when it comes to health care and retirement savings, so that the money we do spend goes into the classroom to make sure we got a world-class education system. The final thing is, you look at other states that have succeeded well. I had Jeb Bush in here a couple months ago, and in Florida, they did an 8+ plan for education. They used assessment tools, not just testing, but assessment tools to grade schools, administrators, and ultimately teachers. They paid for performance. I'd like to see that in Wisconsin.
If you all decide to make me governor, I will bring the most unique background in education to the governor's chair in the history of the state of Wisconsin. I have an undergraduate degree in math education. I have a master's degree in supervision and instructional leadership. It's a principal's degree. I have postgraduate work at Madison. I've taught in the public schools. I've taught in the UW system. I've taught at a private college, chaired the finance committee on the board of regents at another private college. And 7 years ago, we started our first choice schools in the city of Milwaukee under a 501c3 organization. Our schools now are up to about 1,000 students, and as I was mentioning before, they're successfully educating kids that are basically in poverty. And when you think about the Milwaukee public schools, they're not all bad. Some of them are good, and there are some schools where the kids are succeeding. And in those schools, they keep the kids. It's in the failed schools that the kids transfer out and come into our choice and charter schools. So what we're getting are kids primarily that have failed in the public schools. We have demonstrated that we can provide them with a quality education. The Wall Street Journal reports that the graduation rate from choice schools in the city of Milwaukee is 12% higher than in the private schools. Now, only in government would we look at this situation and say that we have a system that's working. 12% higher graduation rate costs 50 cents on the dollar to the taxpayers. We're going to cap the number of students at 22,000 that can be in that system, while we require 80,000 to stay over here in the public system, where the graduation rate is 12% lower and costing the taxpayers twice as much money. So when I think about education, folks, one thing that comes to mind, I would like to see an expansion of the choice and charter program. Now, for the folks that are in public education, it's very important that I say the rest of this. In Wisconsin, there are some great public schools, and we have some great public school teachers that are wrongly blamed for some of the problems in education. A classroom today costing $12,000 per student, having 25 kids in the classroom, is $300,000. It's not our great teachers that are the problem. It's where all the rest of that money is going to and being spent, and I bring back that superintendent example I had before, the mandates and things that do not apply directly to education. So where we have great public schools, I'd encourage that we expand, replicate, and copy them. I'd encourage us to praise our great public school teachers that we have here in the state of Wisconsin. But I would also recommend that where our public schools are failing our students, that we allow choice and charter schools to come in for competition as much as possible, and that we encourage that competition. There's a whole lot to this, folks. Education matters. When you come into my office, if you decide to make me governor, you should expect to see a sign that I look at every morning that says Wisconsin will have the best educated kids in the world, because it's a very high priority of my administration if you choose to make me governor. Thank you.